Hello, Woodhorn Railway here, and just a short review on our Hunslet locomotive. This here, as I say, is the Hunslet locomotive. Came from Vane Tempest Colliery in Seaham in 1993 to the railway, but was actually constructed in 1975. So the locomotive is now 38 years old. It's a 75 horsepower locomotive at the minute. However, when it was first constructed, it was a 60 horsepower engine, Perkins A4 engine. It was then reborn to a 70 horsepower Perkins, and then again to a 75 horsepower Perkins before we got it in '93. It's one of about 20 of them in the country, most of which are still underground in the old collieries. Its name is Black Diamond, after what miners used to call coal. It was known as Black Diamond. It was originally called Elizabeth and Victoria when it first came to the railway. It was then transferred to Linton and Barnstaple when we had a refurbishment over a 3-year period in 2004. It then came back up here in 2006, where it's been running ever since. So to start the locomotive, we get the Hunslet door key and also the main keys for the actual loco, which is also. So we get our Hunslet key into the side of the loco and turn 180 degrees and get out. Then we'll open the door, and always when you're getting into this loco, there's a little hook on the door which you hook in, and that stops the door returning back to its closed position. Now you've got to watch your step when you're climbing in, and once you're inside the locomotive, you then get your electrics key, which don't turn on yet because there's a few checks to do first. And then we've got our main ignition key that goes in there, and then the electrics key. Now I'm just going to step out for a second because there's a couple of checks first. The first check is an engine oil check. So we get our little dipstick out, give it a wipe, pop it back in, and then check it again, and if it's between those two levels or above, it's okay. If it's above, then there's a little bit too much, but we don't need to worry about that because the engine will burn that off while running. The next thing we need to do is check that the air release valve is returned to the horizontal position, and that lets the air build up inside the compressor. We then check the fuel, which is at the top here, which you need to step up onto the loco using the hand holders, and there's loads of fuel in there, so we don't need to fill it up. Also, while you're up here, you can check the radiator level. Just take the cap off the top of the radiator and have a little look in, and I can see the level there, and it's okay. So they can then tighten that back up and step down off the locomotive once that's done. Now you've also got to check that your locomotive's not coupled to anything, which it is at the minute. So we'll uncouple that loco, simple operation, lift the lip, and then lift your coupling on your coach. Now if we head back to the cab, the keys are already in there, so we don't need to put them back in. So we then turn the ignition switch on, check we've got an indication. There's a little switch here which you flick down, then you've got to check it's in neutral first, and that it is, and then you can start your locomotive up with the top key. Now this is the main electrics box, and we'll have a rear wiper switch we have a forward wiper switch, and then we have the two horns, one which is a proper big horn, and then also we've got an air horn, which isn't very good at the minute because we've got to let the air build up before we move. And then we've got the air brakes here, we've got our throttle, and then the gear stick. Takes a bit of a while for the air to build up, so I'll just talk about this. We've got our battery gauge, which tells us if it's in charge or discharge mode. It should all the time be in charge mode, apart from when you start up, where there's a big drop in the battery. That's the starter motor, which then starts the engine. Excuse me. Then we've got our engine hours, which indicate how many hours the engine's been running, and it's currently at 40,601 and a bit. And then at every 500 hours it needs a check, and every 200 hours I believe it needs an oil change. We have our guard control lights, which one's the red and one's the green. And they activate just with push switches on the coaches. With the red one there's also a top buzzer, which is actually down here, sorry. It's a little buzzer which goes off when the red button is switched. And there's also a big flashy light as well as the big steady light. And that tells the driver to stop. Now that the air's built up to about 65, 70, that's pounds, inches squared, or 5 kilograms, centimeters cubed, we can then start moving. So our coach is uncoupled, we know that. We can then apply a gear just by lifting that and pushing or pulling in a given direction. The loco then